Welcome to the World Chess Super Bowl Part 2. Alright, welcome to the World Chess Super Bowl Part 2. This is going to be a fun and exciting video. If you have watched World Chess Super Bowl Part 1, you got to see games played by old masters. This video features games played by modern masters. I'm still going to give the key pointers and concepts, just as I did in part 1. But now you'll get to practice and apply the principles according to the games played by the modern masters. In this first matchup, Grandmaster Amon Hambleton versus International Master Mark Plotkin. And now let the games begin. Whenever black constructs a stone wall-like setup, your task as white is to make a breakthrough with ideas such as a2 to a4, h2 to h3 followed by g2, g4, etc. Question. Both knights are posted in the center. Which knight has the absolute post and which knight has the relative post? The absolute post is a knight post that cannot be kicked by any pawns. But if the knight can be kicked by a pawn, then it is considered a relative post. The knight on e4 has a relative post, whereas knight e5 has an absolute post, and it cannot be kicked by any pawns. Not only does this move prepare a later g2 to g4 break, but also makes room for the king to step off the g-file for a future rook slide. And this is in a concerted effort with the queen on c2. not allowing the knight to occupy e4, which would allow black to solidify his pawn structure on the light squares. The rook on g4 is under fire by the bishop on h5. What would you do as white here? The move that was played in the game was rook g2. Bishop to d3 is the other move. White is willing to make an exchange sacrifice for the initiative to attack. If the bishop takes the rook on g4, then the h-file will become open as a result. For example, after bishop d3, bishop takes g4. In between move, bishop takes h7 check, king steps over, and after white recaptures, now the h-file is open. White will want to step to either g2 or g3 in order to guard h4 while moving the king off the h-file. Rook to h1 is stronger than capturing the pawn right away. A discovered check, gaining tempo on the bishop, check, king f7, and now queen g6 and the bishop falls. Check, rook f7, gaining more tempo on an absolute post. And the winning move here is pawn to g6. To g6. In this next matchup, we have Grandmaster Daniel Narodaisky versus International Master Oladapo Adu. In this next matchup, we have Grandmaster Daniel Narodaisky versus International Master Oladapo Adu. And now let the games begin. In the game, Queen C7 was played. Let's look at another alternative. C takes on D4 with the idea of inflicting an isolani on D4. If C takes D4, and now the C file is open. Now, one truth that we can extrapolate from a positional player's perspective is that the light squares are weaker than the dark squares. These are the pawns that white is targeting: E6, F7, and H7, and in some cases even G7. White sacrifices bishop on H7. Can black accept the piece sacrifice? Offering the trade of queens. In the game, Queen C7 was played, and now the game continues. The move played was bishop F4. Considering a different alternative, bishop F8, and the line goes Now let's go back. Rook on A to D8. Another move for black is knight D5. Bring another piece into the center. And after bishop C1, gaining tempo on the queen side. And after knight F4, black wants to trade the light square bishops and have a nice post on the D3 square. An absolute post. Since the knight cannot be kicked by any pawns, but rook on A to D8 was played and the game continued. Rook to f8 was played. Another try is h6. But after rook f8, the game continued. Rook a to d1. Another interesting line for white is knight takes d7. Now the threat is rook takes on f6, threatening checkmate on h7. But in the game, rook on a to d1 was played and the game continued. In the game, h6 was played. Another move for black was f6. Now this pawn blocks the communication of white's queen and rook. For example, knight f3, rook e8, rook e1, queen takes a4, queen d6, king f7. The king becomes a fighting piece. Rook f1, king g8, rook e1, king f7. But in the game, h6 was played and white continued with knight takes f7. Sacrifice accepted, but it's a temporary sacrifice. The move for black here was, instead of taking the knight, to play e5. Knight takes h6 doesn't work because the queen that sits on c6 is guarding the h6 square. If knight takes h6 check, queen takes h6, and black is up a piece. Therefore, queen takes e5 instead, and now knight f6, queen d6, and after the trade of queens, the rook gets into the action. But in the game, rook takes f7 was played, and the game continued with queen b8 check. Here, white is threatening to double up on the g7 pawn. If black had followed one of my chess assassin principles, he would have avoided the mate threat. If possible, answer a threat with a threat. That is an assassin's principle. Queen takes a4 was played. Now the move that should have been played was knight e3. Now black threatens to mate on g2. And after queen g3, knight f5 and g7 pawn is protected. But queen takes a4 was played, and after queen g3, black resigned. For this next matchup, Grandmaster Jan Christoph Duda versus Grandmaster Vishwanathan Anand. And now, let the games begin. This is the symmetrical English. It should be noted that different move orders are also available. Black played d5. And after g3, the move that was played was knight c6. d4 is possible, closing the a1 to h8 diagonal against white's bishop on b2. But what happens if d takes c4? Then white can recapture, and if queen b6, queen c1. And white can continue development with bishop g2, and after a6, d3, castle kingside, knight b to d2, knight c6, and knight e5. Now let's go back. In this game, after c5, black will continue with e6 followed by d5. The symmetrical English yields black flexibility. Knight c6. Now, as a result of this trade, the light square bishop is free to develop along the c8 to h3 diagonal. Now, closing in the bishop on b2, white will look for a way to develop or to get this bishop open. particularly by playing the e2 pawn to e3, followed by the knight's move to a3 and to c4. Notice the colors in the center. Black's play centers around the yellow squares you see. White's play centers around the blue squares that you see. And the game continued. Bishop f5. Light squares. White is focused on the e5 square. Depending on the amount of pressure that black mounts up against white's queen side, for example, the rook that attacks down the d file, the possible continuation of the knight moving from b4 to either of these squares, along with the bishop that attacks along this diagonal. Again, black focuses on the dark squares. The pawn anchors the bishop on d6. This knight move to b6 not only attacks the rook on d5, but the main idea is to transfer the knight to a4, where it can support a possible advance of the pawn on c4 to c3. Queen f3 was played. Another alternative for white here, rook on 1 to d2 followed by c3. check. And the idea is to set up a barricade in front of the pawn on c3. So should black capture the queen, then a takes b3, the recapture would barricade the pawn on c3. But in the game, queen f3 was played. The knight is well posted. White makes an exchange sacrifice. King h3 was played. Another try for white here is queen d2. And that is the idea of playing the symmetrical English, is very active play on the queen side. Now let's go back. King h3 was played and the game continued. Now black is mounting up pressure now on the king side, while the queen sits on the second rank. The rook will swing over to check the king. Rook h6 check was played. Another move is queen to b1. With the idea of moving to f1 check. But rook h6 was played. g5 was played in the game. Rook c5 was another move, and the line goes rook on e to e8. Why can't black take this pawn? If king takes pawn, then bishop c7 is a discovered check. and the rook on d8 falls. Now going back, the other move was rook d2. Now back to the game. In the game, g5 was played and the game continued. Rook on e to e8, rook d1. Now king d4 was played. Now in the endgame, another principle, an endgame principle, is to keep the rooks very active in the endgame. Rook d6 check was played. White captured on g6. Rook g4 was played. Rook c4 is the move that should have been played. But rook g4 check. Rook h4 was played. A key move for black here, definitely to be considered, was king to e4. Rook h4. Rook e2 was played. I think the only other option that white had was moving the king to g1. And black wins. Thank you for watching. In my next video, Super Bowl Part 3 will feature Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura.